Okay, let's dive into the lovely mess that is Stranger Things Season 5 and spitball where this wild, creaky train might finally pull into the station. Part 1 gave us plenty to chew on, but with volumes 2 and 3 arriving around the holidays, it feels like the show is primed for a finale that will try very hard to be epic, sentimental, and maybe a little bit brutal all at once. I want to run through the theories that make the most sense to me, the ones that are fun to imagine, and the ones that would honestly make me rage quit and throw popcorn at the screen. I will try to be kind to the writers, but I will also call out anything that feels like a contrived twist for the sake of shock. Ready? Good. Pull up a chair, pour something decent, and let's talk about dice, clocks, radio towers, and the possibility that the thing behind everything is not what we think. First up, the idea that the story begins and ends with Dungeons and Dragons feels right on brand for the Duffers. The show kicked off with a table, character sheets, a dimly lit warehouse, and kids who were friends before the supernatural started chipping away at their lives. Several interviews suggest the creators adore that opening game, and it would be poetic to bring the story full circle. Imagine the final moments. The gang back around the table, maybe older, maybe a little more world-weary, rolling dice and telling tall tales. It would be a soft landing, a nod to the series' origins, and a way to say that despite everything they've been through, those friendships were the real magic. Some theories go further and posit that the finale literally flashes back to that first game, or even reframes the entire saga as an imagined campaign. That is a bold move and would be a real polarizing choice. On the one hand, it is a callback to 80s storytelling tropes. On the other hand, it risks making 9 years of character development feel like a mirage, if not handled delicately. I would prefer the show closes on the table because it honors the friendship, not because it undoes everything we've seen. Time travel is a tempting wild card. The clock motif has been in the show more often than a cheap scare in a haunted house. And adding clock sounds retroactively into Season 1 feels like the Duffers quietly saying Vecna and whatever his origin is may have been lurking all along. If we accept that the clock is a narrative device for bending time, then it opens a path for the characters to go back to that original D&D session. Does that mean they changed the past? Possibly. Some fans think the Upside Down could be rewritten, or the characters could be plucked from different points in time and stitched back together. If the writers want an emotionally resonant time loop, a version where the heroes use the clock to secure a different outcome but keep their memories would be lovely. If they instead choose to reveal that the entire series was the kids' collective fantasy, I suspect more than a few viewers will object. That kind of twist must be paid off with real emotional clarity, or it will feel like a bait and switch. There is a neat, almost video game logic swirling around a lot of the predictions, specifically the whole roll a 20 idea. Fans have been doing the math, connecting character numbers and roles like they are assembling a final boss strategy. Vecna calls Will the first. 11 is 11, and with 8 now back in the mix, there's this pleasing arithmetic that says 11 plus 8 plus 1 equals 20. It is glib, sure, but it also fits with the show's mythic logic that certain people are destined to be the counters to the Upside Down. If 11, 8, and Will combine their powers at a crucial moment, and if Max provides some key support by drawing Vecna into a vulnerable place like those caves he first found, then you have the ingredients for a climactic battle that ties back to origin points in the lore. The caves have been seeded as important since Season 4, and the idea that equipment or something pivotal was hidden there ties the final conflict to the show's history in a satisfying way. Speaking of the caves and Vecna's victims, I love the theory that those who were killed by Vecna might still be alive in some form and trapped within the Upside Down. We heard the villain talk about keeping them with him, which in show speak could mean replicated copies or psychic echoes. The Upside Down has proven capable of mimicking objects and environments, and with whoever the show suggests is manipulating psychic phenomena, it is plausible that people could be pulled into a shadowed prison where the physical body dies, but the consciousness lingers. If that is true, the stakes shift. Rescuing people becomes possible again, which would be a heartfelt payoff for characters like Max, and would also give space to bring back beloved figures like Eddie or even Barbara if the writers wanted to go there. Bringing people back risks cheapening the losses unless it's done with weight, apology, and meaningful consequences. But the emotional reunion potential is enormous if played with care. The idea that Eddie could return makes my fan heart happy. He was an instant scene stealer, and his absence still tugs. A return via the Upside Down would be dramatic, and it could be engineered to give closure to other characters. But resurrection or rescue should not be a deus ex machina. The show needs to make it earned. If the kids, or their grown allies, go into the Upside Down to retrieve the lost, there should be a cost. High stakes are important because the series thrives on sacrifice and bittersweet endings. Speaking of sacrifice, let us talk about Steve and the radio tower. Steve Harrington has always been the heart. He grew from a mustache-twirling high school jerk to the big brother the friend group never asked for but desperately needed. The show has telegraphed him stepping into a heroic role, and several scenes across seasons point to a radio tower action set piece this season. Fans have connected this to the way music has been used as a counter to mind control or possession, specifically when a sonic broadcast pushes back on the villain's grip. If the radio tower needs to be powered or rebooted, and Steve is the one to climb up and make sure the signal stays live, it makes narrative sense for him to risk everything. That his shirt in a previous episode referenced the fall feels like classic foreshadowing. If he dies doing that, it will be brutal, but it will also be noble. It would also set the stage for Jonathan and Nancy to find a path forward together, with Steve's sacrifice serving as an emotional punctuation for their complicated relationships. I will say it, I would be gutted, but Steve's death could be one of the rare sacrifices that lands without feeling manipulative. Hopper's arc deserves the same seriousness. He has lost before, and the idea that he would sacrifice himself to prevent a repeat, especially if someone he loves is threatened, fits his character. There's a long tradition in the show of parental figures or surrogate parents laying it all on the line. Hopper dying to save another would be tragic, true, but it could also be a powerful end for a man who's carried so much guilt and duty. That said, the show loves bringing him back from the brink, so it could go either way. If Hopper dies, let it mean something. If he survives, let him come back scarred and changed in a way that honors the cost of the fight. Eleven losing her powers after defeating Vecna is one of those endings that feels inevitable and devastating. Her powers have always been a double-edged sword, a blessing she needed and a price she paid for using. If the final push to vanquish Vecna requires a level of energy or sacrifice that burns her powers out, it will be narratively consistent. It also allows for a bittersweet resolution, where she can live a life freed from the burden of power, but at the cost of the connection that defined so much of her identity. If the show gives her a moment where she chooses to save her friends at the permanent cost of her abilities, it will be a gut punch, but a meaningful one. Thematically, it would also reflect the series' recurring message about growing up. Sometimes you lose things as you move on, but you gain other things, like love and normalcy. But do not get me started on the possibility that Vecna is not the ultimate enemy. The Season 4 play hinted that the narrative might be muddy on the question of who is truly orchestrating the creepiness. There are layers here. Vecna feels like a horrifying, personal antagonist with a backstory rooted in trauma and manipulation. The Mind Flayer, or Mind Flare as some transcriptions have called it, is a more cosmic, Lovecraftian presence. Finally, the emotional center of Stranger Things has always been friendship, love, and the idea that trauma leaves marks but does not necessarily define your future. The show has never been purely a horror series, and its best episodes are those that make you feel like you are part of the group. If the finale can make us feel that one last time, with clarity and tenderness, then it will have done its job. The D&D table is a hopeful image because it suggests that even if the world changes, the small rituals that knit people together can survive. So here is my bottom line. Expect sacrifice. Expect a big battle where music, memory, and psychic power collide. Expect the radio tower to be important, and expect the D&D table to be the emotional bookend. Be ready for heartbreak, but also for a shot of warmth at the end. I would be thrilled if the finale gave us losses that feel earned, rescues that come at a cost, and a final scene that shows the group intact in spirit, even if not in body. If the Duffers can pull that off, then the ending will be a proper goodbye, one that honors the long haul we have taken with these characters. Either way, bring on volumes 2 and 3. I will be watching with tissues at the ready.